want people who are drawn to it to be able to learn it. And that's kind of like my main mission.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's Q&A. I'm here with Sheena from Crooked Calligraphy. Welcome, Sheena.
Hey.
And today, Sheena is going to be walking us through everything you need to know about getting started with pointed pen and breaking down all of the scary factors and reasons why people might not want to try pointed pen. So looking forward to that. But before we get into anything, I just want to remind everybody that if you're seeing this video within the first 24 hours of it going live, make sure you comment below, tell us anything, your favorite color, what you liked about this video, anything, and you'll be entered into a giveaway to win a set of my sold out brush pens. So just by commenting, you'll automatically be entered, and the winners are announced on next week's video. So make sure you've done that. But yeah, welcome, Sheena.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. So before we get started, for those who might not know you, can give us a little rundown of who you are, what you do, and like, normally I don't ask this, but what your past life was too, because I think it's really interesting.
Oh, yeah. So I'm Sheena. My company is Crooked Calligraphy, and I do calligraphy for a bunch of different companies and brands and stuff in LA. But actually what I do most of and what I like most of is teaching calligraphy. And I teach pointed pen calligraphy specifically. And the reason that I like teaching calligraphy so much is because it has literally changed my life. I know that sounds super hokey and corny, but maybe y'all can understand. And the reason it's done that is because, oops, sorry, my thingy is shaking here, is because I wasn't always a calligrapher. I was actually a corporate lawyer for 6 years, and like hardcore corporate lawyer, working on IPOs and mergers and acquisitions and like staying up all hours, and like that was basically my life. I didn't think I was creative at all,
like
until
Suits.
I found calligraphy.
You were basically on Suits.
Yeah, Suits is terrible. As a representation of like what a lawyer does. Like I've
honestly always wondered what lawyers would think of that show. I'm like, they probably hate this, just like doctors would think of like Grey's Anatomy.
Exactly, like Grey's Anatomy. Yeah, that's my exact correlate. I'm like, he would never do that kind of law. He's a corporate lawyer. How can he be in criminal court? It just doesn't make sense. But yes, I was sort of in that kind of high pressure law firm environment, working in a big glass building in New York, and then back in LA here. And I like got to a point where I got burned out, and I quit with absolutely no plan of what I was going to do. And I just kind of started like exploring kind of desperately for something, because I also used to think I didn't have a passion, and that kind of really bummed me out, and I thought there was something wrong with me there. So I was actually, unbeknownst to me, sort of developing it the whole time. I took a calligraphy workshop. I was hooked. I practiced obsessively every day after, and I started my company, and it's been 3 years.
Okay. So like the words you just said, like I took a calligraphy workshop, I got hooked, and I practiced obsessively. I am not kidding. Those are the words I say at the beginning of every single one of my workshops.
Oh, very
exact
cool.
same. Amazing.
Yeah. So you understand that feeling of like walking in, and that's why I'm super excited about calligraphy. I want people who are drawn to it to be able to learn it. And that's kind of like my main mission, to learn it and not give up.
And I'm glad that you teach pointed pen calligraphy, because I feel like most people are teaching brush calligraphy these days. I do a bit of both. But people are definitely scared of pointed pen. And the first workshop I ever took was pointed pen. And that's what I got, like, absolutely, like I fell in love with it. But there's definitely a barrier to entry there. So,
yes.
Yeah, maybe I'll let you talk a little bit about that. And I know that you have a course on the whole thing, so I'll just let you take it away, and then we can get into your lesson.
Okay. Yeah, cool. So I'll address that just here facing you, because I hear this so often from students who learn with me and other people who just like follow me on Instagram. I ask them what's keeping them from learning pointed pen calligraphy, and they answer like, it's like super intimidating. Like I have no idea where to start. It looks like very, very complicated. I feel like it's impossible. Like you need to be just naturally gifted and talented, and maybe be like trained by wizards, and I couldn't possibly do it. So So I hear that so much and I'm like, no, it's actually, I totally acknowledge it's intimidating. Brush pen, you get the right marker, you get the right paper, you learn the technique, you're good. A little more complicated than that, you guys know, but pointed pen, there's the extra little metal thingy, and then there's the elbow coming off the side of the pen, and you dip it in ink, and there's sort of a right way to do all of that. But I'm here to tell you, if you find someone to get you started and in the right direction, or anyone else who's teaching a point of pen calligraphy workshop in your area, I mean, once you get that, you can totally absolutely do it. So I do have an online calligraphy course. It's called Modern Calligraphy 101. It's just moderncalligraphy101.com. And I also, where I dive into much more of this, but I'm here to give you guys really the guidance you need to get on your way so that you don't get foiled up in the very beginning stages. And I'm also going to put everything that I'm telling you into a nice little PDF with clickable links, so you don't have to be like furiously scribbling notes the entire time. You can find that at crookedcalligraphy.com / right, that's that slash, the happy ever crafter. So we'll sort of go into more detail afterwards, but I just wanted to mention that up front. And now I'm going to just flip my camera around so I can show you guys my desktop. Okay, guys, so I just kind of wanted to address this in terms of myths. I'm going to sort of structure it that way, and I'm going to talk about myth number one. It's super intimidating, and you have to be naturally gifted at it, and I can't possibly learn it, and it's impossible. Myth number two, you have to have a lot of expensive tools to do pointed pen calligraphy. And myth number three is, once you get all that stuff in place, it should be like smooth and flowy and all good, right? So those are the three myths, and I'm going to throw you a lot of detailed information in between all of those. Myth number one is just, you got to be naturally gifted and it's impossible. And you guys, I mean, I totally get it. Calligraphy it can be intimidating to start. And I feel ya, because it's what I did. So this actually is one of the first things I tried to write with a Tombow brush pen, because I Googled calligraphy pen and that was the first thing that popped up. So I was like, oh yeah, great, I'll just buy that. I had no idea how to use it. This is what happened. It's not like, awful, but I have like no idea what I'm doing. And so I ruined my pen and I gave up. And then I bought this guy because I was like, I'm going to give it another try. So I Googled calligraphy pen on Amazon, and this is what happened. Because this is a parallel pen from Pilot. The nib is flat, and you write like this. And this did not give me the look that I wanted either. I wanted to do pointed pen calligraphy, but I didn't know it was called pointed pen calligraphy. So that's kind of my first thing. You want to learn modern pointed pen calligraphy or pointed nib calligraphy. And I'm telling you, once you get sort of the guidance to get going, you can do it. It's not going to look perfect right away. This is one of my pages from my very first pointed pen calligraphy workshop. But the key is, once I knew I had the right tools and I was using them in the right way, even though it looked crappy at first, I kept going, because you'll know that once you are doing once you have the right technique, you can practice it and slowly get better. Okay. Instead of feeling like you're just totally lost and frustrated and like, God knows what I'm doing wrong. So that's myth number one. You can totally learn it. You just need to find yourself a guide. And that can be paid or not. That can be some free stuff online. Find yourself a guide. Myth number two is that you need a bunch of fancy equipment to do pointed pen calligraphy. And I do use all this stuff to do pointed pen calligraphy. And I totally understand why it's confusing, because you see sort of like nice fancy pens on Etsy and on Instagram. You maybe see like that starter speedball, just calligraphy set. It says calligraphy set. And it comes with a bunch of different kinds of nibs and you don't know what to do with them. So I'm here to tell you, you do not need all this stuff. Where am I going to put this? I'm going to put this back over here. You need 4 things. So you need a calligraphy nib holder. So some people just call it a calligraphy pen, but it can also be called a nib holder, or a pen holder, because it holds your nib. That's number 2. So first, nib holder. Number 2, nib. Number 3, you need ink. And number 4, you need the right kind of paper. So honestly, guys, that's it. 4 things that you need to buy to get started, and then everything else you already have at home. Like, I use a little jar of water to rinse my nib, and I use paper towels to wipe them. But let me go into a little bit more detail on the 4 things here, because I know that that also can get kind of confusing and overwhelming. So, okay, nib holder. So this is just a speedball plastic nib holder. You can totally use this to start, especially because it's pretty affordable and it's pretty widely available. Like, you can find it at craft stores and art stores, and you can definitely find it online. If this is the only holder that you can sort of easily access, you can totally get started with this. If you can go a little bit more pricey, I'm talking like 5, 7, 10 extra dollars, then I would suggest going with a dual holder. So this is a dual holder with a brass flange. On this one, the flange is plastic. The flange is just the part that holds the nib. And the reason, I want to make sure you guys can kind of see here, it might be a little difficult to tell, but the reason I like using holders with a brass flange is because on this holder, the plastic one, you can see that the flange is just lined up straight with the body of the pen, right? Like, it's kind of, they're pretty like parallel with each other. On this one, you can see that the flange is slightly angled up compared to the way the rest of the body goes, right? So slightly angled up, and that just gives you a better nib, a nicer, smoother nib position once you're actually writing with it. Okay, the other cool thing about this dual oblique holder is that it's called dual because this guy pops out. The flange pops out, and you can use this as a straight holder as well. Or you can put the flange back inside, and you can use this as an oblique holder, like that. And I'll quickly just tell you, generally oblique holders, they were created for right-handed people to get the right slant. So you can see that now that I've put this down, this flange, right, is pointing my nib this way. Whereas if I was using a straight holder and I was right-handed, it'd be much harder. I'd have to kind of twist my arm around, right, to get this slant. I'm naturally kind of like this. That's also the reason why for most left-handed people, I recommend starting with a straight holder, because look at this. You lefties, man, you naturally are on that slant already, okay? So that's the beauty of the dual oblique holder. So if you can find this, and again, I'll include this in that freebie we're giving you, I would go with this. It's a little bit extra, but it is a lot better. If this is all you can find, you can totally start with this as well. All right. So that's a note on just the holders. The nib, this is my favorite beginner nib. It's like a favorite beginner nib with a lot of calligraphers. It's called the Nico G, and it's just a good beginner nib because it's sturdy. It's sort of, medium flex. It doesn't, but it's not so delicate. It doesn't like catch on the paper. You don't have to worry about snagging it on things or tweaking it out of alignment. Um, the reason I would not recommend, this is the nib that comes with the speedball set that you usually see. And this is a lot more delicate and it will catch a lot more on the fibers. This doesn't even fit right in this holder. There's just, I can totally see why you might run into some snags and frustration, right? Trying to get started without all this knowledge. So Nico G nib is a great beginner nib to start with. Okay, ink. My favorite is Sumi ink. It's I like this brand, Moon Palace, but honestly, you can use any brand of Sumi ink, Kuretake, Yasutomo, they're all good. It's a great texture. You don't have to water it down. It dries pretty water resistant. Oop. And you also have to be prepared to just like make a mess anytime you use live ink. You'll get it all over yourself. It's beautiful. So Sumi ink, that's my go-to beginner ink. And then the paper, I like HP Premium 32. So just like with brush pens, you can't just use any old, copier paper or whatever you have on hand for calligraphy. It will bleed and feather and snag your nib and be terrible. So you want to use HP Premium. If you're in the US, that's pretty easy to get. If you're outside of the US, 120 gram paper is the equivalent. So that will work for you. You can find that in any office supply store. You don't have to buy fancy calligraphy, specialty calligraphy paper. All right. So those are the 4 things that you need to get started. It doesn't take a lot of expensive tools. If you're in the US or I think even in Canada, it's fairly inexpensive to find this stuff. Outside of the US and Canada, it just kind of depends by country, unfortunately, but there are a lot of places where you can get this stuff online now that you know what you're looking for. Okay, myth number 3 is that once you have these tools, it's all just gonna go nice and smooth and easy. You can just dip, get started right away. It'll all be good. Um, and this is where a lot of people sort of hit more frustrations and snags and they kind of like give up on their point and pen calligraphy because it's just not working the way that it looks on Instagram. So, number 1, Instagram videos with point and pen calligraphy almost always sped up. So, nobody writes that fast. Some people do. Some very special people, but most people take it really, really slow. And again, I just wanted to show you, I mean, this is my first workshop stuff. Like it's it's kind of rough. This is towards the end of my workshop, but I mean, I kind of had blobby areas, like there's a lot of shakiness. This is all perfectly natural stuff when you're first starting, so please don't let that derail you. It's gonna look crappy in the beginning. That's just what I tell all of my students, and it gets a little laugh and it diffuses the tension because it's true, because you're using all sorts of weird, funky tools. So let me give you some pointers on actually prepping your tools correctly and using them correctly. So you saw how I inserted, right, into my holder. So you just want to make sure it's like pretty firmly in there so it doesn't wobble. You saw how I inserted it, right, just in the top to be used as a straight holder. For the speedball plastic oblique, this has a bit of a different opening. I don't know if you guys can see that there, but it's got like a circle all around. So with this one, it's a little bit more difficult, but you want to put the holder on a surface and you want the vent hole or the oval to be facing straight up towards the ceiling. That's kind of how you know that it's in correctly. So you want the nib curve to be like this, kind of like it's a little roof with something underneath, and you want that vent hole to be facing straight up. That's with this kind of holder. With this one, it's a bit easier, right, to figure that out. Okay. Second thing, once you have your nib in your holder, is you actually have to clean brand new nibs. So I'm going to get out just a brand new Eco G. And if you just put this in your holder and you start trying to use it, it's not going to work for you. The ink's not going to flow. It'll be very, very frustrating. And I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to try and show you why on this video. Let's see if this cooperates with me. Okay. So can you, hopefully you can see, it's kind of subtle, but this one is brand new. And this one I've been using for a while. And this one you can see the ink is not coating fully, right? It's kind of like patchy. It's kind of bubbling up in some places. This one, it's coating fully, like all the way down the tines. So if it doesn't stick properly to your nib, the ink, then it's not going to flow down properly and create your letters for you. So there's lots of different ways that you can clean your nibs. Some people, you can do soap and water, just kind of scrub with an old toothbrush, or you can even use your hands. I use a lazy method, and I just dip it into the ink and clean it, dip it and clean it, dip it and clean it, just like I'm doing now, until the ink sticks a little more fully onto the nib. I wouldn't recommend using fire. I've heard that question. It can be dangerous, and it can also kind of like, I've heard that it can weaken your nibs if you hold the fire on there too long. So, I mean, I know it's kind of cool, but I would stick to the soap and water. All right. So I'm just cleaning my nib off with my paper towel, and I'm going to give it a dip, and you can see hopefully that it is coating the nib really evenly, and that means that it'll flow down for you. Okay, you have inserted your nib into your holder, you've cleaned your nib properly. Next, I'm going to show you how to dip into your ink, because there's a right way to do that. The wrong thing to do, what you don't want to do, is like dunk your entire nib fully into your ink so that you get just completely overloaded. If you try and use your nib like this, do you see what happens? The ink just kind of blobs down and makes a mess. Okay, so you don't want to just dunk your entire nib in. You want to dip only until the vent hole is covered. So you're going to dip until the vent hole is covered. And then what I like to do is scrape once across the edge of the jar. So I'm scraping the top of my nib against the edge of the jar. That takes the excess ink off the top and leaves you a nice well of ink in the nib on the underside. All right. So that's the proper way to dip into your ink. So now we're going to get into actually, finally, using this guy to make some strokes. And I am going to just demonstrate on this worksheet, and this will be included in the freebie at crookedcalligraphy.com/the happy ever crafter. So you can get this, get instant access, download it, print it out on the right paper, right? Remember what I told you in the tools section, you got to use the right paper. So print this out on the right paper. And then you can just kind of try some of these basic, like fundamental strokes. So these are just to get you sort of familiar with your nib and the way that it works. If you follow Becca at all, you know that she teaches the basic like shapes, the basic strokes that make up letters. So that's not what these are. You do absolutely want to use those as well in pointed pen calligraphy, but I just wanted to make it clear that these are just to get familiar with your nib, right? But they're a good way to do that. So I'm going to dip into my ink, and Okay. Guys, there are so many things to tell you about the proper positioning and technique for pointed pen calligraphy. But the most important thing is to get your nib at the right angle. So by angle, I mean this angle, like the angle to the paper. So you want it to be nice and shallow like this. You do not want to be upright like this. So this will lead to a terrible scratchy experience. You want to be nice and shallow. You also want to make sure that your vent hole, that's that hole in the middle of the nib, is facing up, not to the side. You never want that facing off to the side. This means you're on the side of your nib, and that will also be scratchy and terrible. All right. So, angle, rotation. So, you want to make sure you get those two right. And then just try making some heavy downstrokes. And if you're doing this, that means you're not pushing hard enough. If you're pushing hard enough, you'll notice that the tines open up on the nib. I usually get like a wow, cool when this happens. This kind of shows you more. I've run out of ink, but that shows you what's happening. The tines are opening up, and that gives you your nice thick stroke. When you run out of ink, just dip again, the way that I taught you. Okay. And then you want to practice some really light upstrokes. Okay. So upstrokes are wee bastards. Everybody struggles with upstrokes. Notice I'm doing them really nice and smooth, right? But what most beginners tend to do, especially if you're a heavy writer, is to kind of like press way too hard. And then you're like digging into the paper and not working right. So all you got to do there is really lighten up. Try and use the lightest possible pressure to make a mark. And it does not take much. All right. So that's sort of the fundamentals, right? This is what gives pointed pen calligraphy and brush pen calligraphy, all calligraphy really, its beautiful look is that there are thick downstrokes and thin upstrokes. And the great thing about this, that you don't get with faux calligraphy is that the nib just makes them on their own. But you do have to learn how to use it at the right angle and rotation and get that pressure right. So these other exercises are just sort of getting used to alternating between that heavy down and light up. I'm not going to go through all of these, but when you have this printed out, you'll see that this asks you to like put more and more pressure on your nib, see how far it can go, do this exercise with maybe more and more pressure, but still keeping the upstrokes light. Here we're going more continuously, so this will take some practice, right, to get smooth. And again, that's teaching you how to go between heavy down, light up. And then all these strokes sort of continue that practice of really light upstrokes and heavy downstrokes. And the entire time, I want you to remember to keep the angle of the nib shallow and the rotation of the nib correct. So you do not, donut, do not want to be rotated down like this. You want to make sure your vent hole is facing straight up. All right. So that's what I got for you for getting started, like really getting set up correctly in pointed pen calligraphy. So you'll notice, we didn't get into letters. We didn't even get into the basic strokes that make up letters. Because, guys, this craft, like, it takes some time. That, was myth number 3, that it should all be smooth and dandy once you get the right tools. But remember that this is a funky thing you're learning how to use. It's like got a crazy angle to it. It's got a metal tip, like a sharp point. You're dipping into this live, fresh ink. You're using all these skills. You're pressing down hard and then you're going up light. You're using a lot of stuff all together, all at once. That is very unfamiliar, that you haven't used before. So even though when you see Instagram videos and they look just like cursive flowing writing and it looks so smooth, it takes a lot to get there. But as long as you know that you've got all these basics and fundamentals, the right tools, the right prep, and the right technique, then you know that you can get there. All right.
So that was perfect. Thank you so much, Sheena. I think that'll be really enlightening for people. There are a couple things in there that you mentioned that I think are like easy troubleshooting things that people don't ever like actually
Mm-hmm.
learn or hear from somebody that will frustrate the crap out of them and make them put it down altogether. So
Yeah.
hopefully that's helpful for people. I just had one question. In your
Mm-hmm.
workshops, when you're teaching, what are like, if you had to name three of the most common mistakes or like easy troubleshooting things that you see people needing?
Okay, so the number one piece of advice, I mean, the word that I say the most often in my workshops is slow down. I'm sure you can relate because it does trickily look like cursive handwriting, which people tend to do fast. And then, people are busy and they're used to getting things done quickly and they want to just get there in life. Calligraphy is really an exercise in slowing down, and you really have to in order to get this is like learning how to ride a bike. It's like new muscle memory. So you have to slow down in order to really get that movement really into your body so that it can go faster and flow later on down the line. Um, Number two is just getting that nib positioning right. So I just repeat it over and over in my workshops. I give reminders in my online courses because even if you know it in your head and you think you have it right, it just kind of tends to like your old habits come in and that nib tends to slip down, or you kind of get hunched up and you're upright. So it's again like learning to ride a bike, and it's retraining yourself to hold it in the right way. So that's number two. And then probably number three is just pushing too hard on the pen. So we're used to using a pencil or a ballpoint pen where you can just kind of dig into the paper and it doesn't matter. With the nib, if you try and dig into the paper at all, it will bite you back. It will not work. It'll snag. It'll be rough and scratchy. And that's unfortunately where a lot of people give up because they don't know that that's what they're doing wrong. And it could be any number of things. So that's really I know that there is a lot to it. I kind of, and this is why I recommend finding a guide, because I kind of liken learning pointed pen calligraphy to like going through it alone is kind of like going through a huge hedge maze on your own. Like you just don't know if you don't know, you hit a dead end, you don't know which way to go. And then more importantly, you don't know like where you are in the hedge maze. Like, am I near the end? Am I going in the right direction? Am I like totally going in circles? That's where it really is helpful to have a guide that can like nudge you in the right direction. And more importantly, tell you like, hey, I know it's looking a little rough right now, but you're headed in the right direction. Keep going. Keep doing what you're doing. It'll get better. And sometimes that's just what people need to hear in order to not give up on it and to keep going with it.
And so there are like a lot of people who teach calligraphy and a lot of guides, like you
Hmm.
mentioned, but
Yeah.
obviously we're going to tell people about yours. So can you tell us a little bit more about what's in your actual course and just the info behind all of that?
Yeah, definitely. So all the stuff that I just taught you now, there's probably twice as much detail, and that's just in the beginning portion of the course. So I've taken a lot of other online courses where they kind of give you a brief introduction and they go like, let's write letters now, and they just kind of demonstrate a lot of letters, which I find it can get really confusing and it can get overwhelming. So what I wanted to do was make it approachable and doable and fun so that you actually stick with it, because I found that that's the problem for most people is that you get a lot of gung-ho in the beginning and then you hit some snags and you do pages and pages of drills and you're like, ugh, and you kind of put it away. So I have Klingon in my worksheets. I have nincompoop. I have like surprise fun phrases. The whole time the attitude is just like, keep going, you can do it, have fun. And then I also give you the really step-by-step fundamentals. So I teach in a sort of, there's like four sort of overall steps to kind of the system that I teach. And that's prep correctly. So getting the right tools and sort of prepping them and learning, to use them correctly. That's what I've shown you. The second is technique, and that's really honing down on the right positioning of your nib, the right positioning of your paper, how to get that slant, all that nitty gritty stuff. The third is build, and that's really where I think we teach similarly. There's those basic strokes. You want to get those down before you build those into letters, and then you build those letters into words by using a connecting stroke. That's kind of a fundamental stroke. And then, so you build up step by step instead of trying to wade in all at once. Step number 4 is style. So you also want to, I teach how to add style in a more intentional way, adding on to those basics instead of just like throwing a bunch of random stuff on there and being like, why doesn't it look good? So that's, I break it all down, and hopefully that makes it approachable and doable, and it gives you the confidence to like keep going with it even after the course ends.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like you've covered all of the things that I would want in an online course to learn calligraphy.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, I do see a lot that are just like, here's what tool to choose, and now I'm going to walk you through how to build every letter. And it's like,
yeah,
you skipped like 18 steps there. So yeah, I'm glad that you teach like that too. So where can people find you most easily?
So my website is crookedcalligraphy.com. I'm Crooked Calligraphy on Instagram, and you can find me there almost every day. And I have the freebie for you guys at crookedcalligraphy.com /the happy ever crafter.
I always just say slash. I don't know why people say
the
like
slash that you put there. I don't know.
Yeah,
you know what it is, right?
I think most people understand that. Like you just say slash.
Yeah.
But I hear so many people say / and I don't. I mean,
it's more confusing. I don't know. Yeah, that's true. You're like, as opposed to what?
Like, where do you use the backward slash?
In coding? I don't know, actually.
I don't know either.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much, Sheena. I think this will be really, really helpful for people. And it's lovely to finally put a face to the Instagram name.
Yeah, I so admire like everything that you're doing and the way that you just like run your business and teach people.
Thank you.
So
Back
it's been
at
awesome
you.
to talk to you.
I want to do one of these at you.
Oh yeah.
So for those of you who
praise the
for those of you who follow Sheena on Instagram, you might have seen a little while back she did this this Instagram story asking people if that, the emoji where the hands are doing this and there's like an exclamation above it. She was asking if that means high 10 or if it means like praise hands, because I think it means praise hands. She thinks it means high 10. So
high 10, like give me a high 10. I use that emoji a lot, and I'm like, okay, well now have I just been like praising myself in every caption that I do? Like, is that what I meant? I meant like give me a high 10. Whatever.
I use it a lot too, but I do use it in the praise instance. So for those of you watching, let us know in the comments. If you're going to comment anyway to try and enter the giveaway, let us know which one of those you think is correct, because we have a little contest going on. But yeah, so make sure you've commented. If you're looking at this video within the first 24 hours, let us know what you liked, which praise hands are correct. And yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and thanks again, Sheena. We will see you guys all next week.
Cool.
Bye.